So real quick, man, I want to talk to you guys briefly about a couple things. Number one, about probably the most trending topic right now is the whole UPS buyout situation. I want to talk about that, but I also want to talk about a lot of the comments that I've read regarding UPS driver pay. All right, so let's go ahead and start with the buyout. Just in case you've been under a rock, let's go back to how this all kind of transpired, right? So in 2023, UPS, a unionized company, for those who don't know, Teamsters and UPS came to an agreement and they signed a new contract, right? This contract was a very lucrative contract. You got to give credit to the Teamsters, regardless of how you feel about the unions. I get it. Some people hate them. Some people are definitely pro-union. But I got to give credit to the Teamsters. I mean, I think there was a lot of great incentives in that contract. It was a 5-year contract where the UPS employees would be paid X amount of dollars over time, along with some other what I would consider perks and benefits and things of that nature, right? Fast forward to today, UPS is now offering full-time employees buyout packages. Essentially, they are offering them these packages to get them to quit, leave the company, etc. And this buyout consists of them paying the employees. Specifically, I want to talk about the drivers, the full-time drivers, paying them $1,800 for every year of service that they've committed to the company. So for example, if a driver has been with a company for 30 years, you will multiply that by 1,800, and that comes up to $54,000 if I'm not mistaken. That buyout also comes with a guaranteed minimum of $10,000. So let's use another example. If you're a driver and you've been with a company, let's say 5 years, you will multiply 5 times 1,800. That would actually come up to $9,000. However, with the guaranteed $10,000 minimum, you would get $10,000. And so that's how that will work. Now, the sentiments, at least from what I'm hearing across YouTube and other social media platforms, listening to various UPS drivers, the sentiment seemed to be that nobody likes this buyout, this offer, right? This buyout package, if you will. Nobody that I've heard so far likes it. They're calling it trash. They're calling it a slap in the face. And they're just not with it. And to be honest, you can't necessarily blame them, right? Now, I'm reading a lot of comments where people are saying, look, you guys should take it. You're going to end up, being laid off anyway with nothing, or you're going to lose your job with nothing. You might as well take it. That's easier said than done, right? You're not the one with, 15, 20, 30 plus years with a company. So, it's a little bit harder when you have, emotions involved, when you spent so much time with a company, you invested so much time, so much, sweat equity, etc. You have pensions involved and all these other things. Again, these are 6-figure salary drivers that we're talking about, if you're talking about the driver specifically. So, it's a little bit hard to part ways with that amount of money, right? But just to go back to the drivers for a second, one of the things that kind of kills me is a lot of the comments that I'm seeing regarding the driver pay. It seems to be coming from a jealous space, a place of envy, a place of hate, particularly when I see comments and people are saying things like, all you guys do is deliver packages. You shouldn't have never been paid $100,000+ to do that job. It's not worth it. It's not like you guys are doing brain surgery. Somebody said that all these UPS drivers do is whine and they're a bunch of divas. Somebody said, I hope they all just don't get anything and they get fired. I mean, they were saying all type of stuff, right? And I'll just say this, man. Again, like I mentioned earlier, I give credit to Teamsters for being able to even negotiate in this type of contract to make it so lucrative, right? Now, the contract may backfire. That's kind of what it seems like it's doing right now. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But just on the surface, the contract looked pretty sweet. I mean, I think the top pay was like $49 an hour over a 5-year period. This contract, again, was for 5 years. And it looked nice, right? UPS was definitely the talk of the town when this whole thing came out. It was a big deal. I still think it's a big deal. Even more so now with all the controversy around this whole buyout situation. But, you know, a lot of drivers, again, they're just not accepting anything. And you really can't blame them at the end of the day. But here's the thing, right? For the people that are, you know, saying all this negative stuff about UPS and it's not worth it and things of that nature, me personally, I think those guys and girls, men and women, I should say, they deserve the money that they're making. I think these drivers deserve to be paid 6-figure salaries, right? Coming from somebody who's a truck driver who also does a physically demanding job, some would argue that the job I do, touch freight, food service, is probably a harder job than UPS. However, UPS drivers deliver to way more customers than I do, right? You're talking about, I mean, some of these drivers go to hundreds of stops a day. Hundreds. That's a lot of deliveries to make, right? Not only that, some of these drivers are working from dusk till dawn. Like, I can speak from what I've seen over the years, you know, just casually passing by UPS drivers in my city, right? It's nothing to see a driver in the early morning hours out here on the highway somewhere. You see them delivering to a particular, you know, location, a business. And then later on in the evening / night, you still see this same driver out somewhere else, you know, still working. And it's like, man, this guy literally been out here all day delivering packages. I was listening to a driver on a podcast yesterday. He was talking about the whole buyout situation. And he started talking about his own personal schedule. And he said he leaves his house at about 7 o'clock in the morning. And worst case scenario, he's stayed out as late as midnight, leaving at 7 o'clock in the morning and coming back home at midnight. Now, he said that's worst case scenario. Those type of days don't happen often, but he said they do experience long days, right? And work long hours. UPS drivers get a ton of overtime. And, you know, this driver also talked about some of the overtime. He started explaining the overtime. Obviously, you guys have heard of, you know, double overtime. They get paid triple overtime in some cases. And then something I've never heard of, which is quad overtime. So essentially, and UPS drivers chime in and correct me if I'm wrong, but this particular driver said, basically, if a driver works more than 9.5 hours a day, more than 3 times in a week, they get paid triple overtime for the hours worked after 9.5, right? If that continues, if those type of, you know, hours over 9.5 continue, let's just say it goes on for a month or whatever the case may be, they can, you know, submit a grievance or whatever, and they get paid quad overtime, which means they get paid 4 times the amount of hours, you know, worked over that 9.5 hour mark. So just by hearing that, you can see how the money adds up with the overtime. He said he's seen drivers make, you know, $1,000 just in penalty fees, right? And, you know, he also mentioned something else, which is to say that a lot of these drivers don't necessarily like being out that long, right? And that's why they have these guardrails in place and these penalties in place to basically say, you know what, we really don't want to, you know, keep these guys out here very long, because if we do, we know we're going to have to pay these guys more money, right? So they don't necessarily want to do it. However, sometimes guys do fall within those, you know, areas to where they have to pay them for being out so long. You know, these guys and girls, men and women, they have families too. And I think a lot of people, when it comes to the comments that you guys are making, a lot of the negative comments, these drivers are sacrificing a lot when it comes to, you know, spending time away from family, not being home, working long hours, like all these different things. I don't think you guys are including the sacrifice that these drivers are making when you just only thinking about the money that they're making. They're also sacrificing a lot. Also, they're sacrificing their bodies, right? You know, you have back injuries doing this type of work. Your body is aching. So, you know, it's a very physically demanding job doing this type of work. Again, I've been in the delivery touch freight business over the past 20 plus years. The last 3 jobs that I've had, it's been touching freight, it's been delivery, it's been going up and down a ramp, it's been picking up heavy boxes, heavy cases, which is something that I still do to this day. I'm 43 years old, and I could tell you it does take a toll on your body, right? There's a lot of wear and tear that goes on your body. We get paid well also, right? You got guys doing what I do that make six-figure salaries, excuse me. It's a lot of guys that make 6-figure salaries doing this type of work. Now, I'm a Class A CDL driver. When it comes to UPS, particularly some of the package drivers, those guys are non-CDL drivers. But, you know, they deliver a lot of packages, man, and it's a very physically demanding job. So, you know, in order for you to appreciate how hard these guys work, you got to do it. And I think some of you that are commenting all this negative stuff, you probably wouldn't be able to last a day. Definitely probably not a week doing what they do. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's a tough job being in a hot truck. I know the contract, I believe they had some language in the contract where they were going to be installing some ACs in the truck. I don't know if that went into effect or is, you know, is going to be in the future. I have no idea. I don't work for UPS, but I know there was some language in the contract that stated that they were going to install ACs in the trucks. But before that, I mean, these guys were drenched in sweat when you see them making these deliveries. And so my hat's off. I salute the, you know, the UPS drivers, man. I understand the hard work you guys put in. I got a couple buddies that work for UPS. So, you know, I know it's a physically demanding job. I respect you guys. You know, UPS has always been one of the premier blue collar jobs out there. I mean, it's universal, one of the premier top tier creme de la creme blue collar jobs out there. Back in the day when I was growing up, if you talked about the good paying jobs, UPS was at the top of the list. It was at the top of the conversation, and it still is. So, you know, this is a very good job. The insurance, top notch. The pensions, again, regardless of how you feel about the unions, it is what it is. But before I close out this video, I just want to say, you know, the more and more I hear about this whole buyout situation, the CEO stated that Amazon was basically their biggest customer, but also their least profitable customer, which is why they decided to part ways. They thought it would be a good idea long term to part ways with them. And then also too, when you add the addition of the whole hub conversion, making the hubs, I don't know, I think it's like 200 plus hubs that they plan on converting, making it more automated and doing away with some of the human labor. All of these things should increase their revenue and make them more profitable long term. They're looking for sustainability, so they gotta trim the fat somewhere. And what do I always say? Companies go to payroll, right? And so when you think about some of these, you know, big salaries that these drivers are making, particularly some of the tenured drivers that's been with the company for a very long time, if you can, you want to try to get them off your books. Again, that's going to be a challenge, particularly when you look at the sentiments from the drivers. So, you know, it's probably going to be a challenge trying to get people to get on board with that particular offer. And, you know, based on what they make, they're going to have to come up with a better offer, it seems like. So again, we'll see how all this unfolds. So yeah, UPS want to get back to a competitive position. When you think about the competition, Amazon, FedEx, I mean, both of them have much lower overhead. FedEx has a bunch of independent contractors that work for them delivering packages. So UPS want to have a stronger presence. They want to be more profitable, have a better sustainable business. So we'll see. Y'all let me know what you think about this whole buyout situation. Drop it in the comment section. Any UPS driver watching this video, if I made a mistake on anything, definitely correct me in the comments. I salute you guys. I appreciate it. I hope everything works out in your favor. I'll holler at you guys on the next one. Peace.